this is a slightly devil's advocate question. The act of producing cinema, whether it's a short film, a feature, anything, can arguably be described as wasteful.
In our studio, when we are in animation films, when it comes to people, some of them are not even ordering food because they bring plastic when you order from Swiggy or so. Then people prefer to just walk out and eat somewhere rather than ordering in.
I will be the devil's advocate and say that, look, life is wasteful. Every time we step out of the house, we are consuming resource, and I don't generally think that paper straws and so on and so forth are the solution. I think it's generally about asking whether you need to do that thing or not, whether you need that extravagance, whether you need to be doing that. Can you deal with a little discomfort? And unfortunately, if you ask me, I will say, yes, I'm happy to deal with a lot of discomfort. I'm a documentary filmmaker, but I'm also not the one creating a lot of that extravagance. And the people that are, I don't think they're asking or being asked that question. So maybe that question needs to be asked. And then we're talking about capitalism. And then we're just talking about a whole larger problem.
Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to welcome you all to a very special occasion, the curtain raiser for the 6th edition of the All Living Things Environmental Film Festival, ALT EFF. Whether you're joining us for the first time or regular with us or on our live stream, thank you all for being here. I know the traffic is a little tricky today with all the various morchas going on. My name is Asad Lalji. I'm the CEO of Avid Learning. At a time when conversations around climate crisis can feel abstract or overwhelming, it is storytelling that makes these issues personal and urgent. Films, in particular, have a unique ability to awaken empathy and leave us with images and emotions that linger long after the screen goes dark. Environmental cinema not only documents the threats we face, but also reminds us of the choices still within our reach. Beyond the facts and figures, it is stories that truly move people to care and to act, a role that ALT EFF team has curated films excellently since 2020. With this curtain raiser, Avid Learning also continues our ongoing collaboration and support with ALT EFF since its inception. In 2021, the association included an online mini film festival in partnership with Mumbai Opera Online. For decades, Avid Learning has curated film-centric programming that goes beyond the screen, bringing together directors, writers, critics, and cinephiles, from workshops on screenwriting to deep dives into film journalism, from decoding the future of film in the age of AI to spotlighting the impact of documentary storytelling. Tonight's program is also part of our Cinema for Change, an ongoing series that collaborates with filmmakers, festivals, storytellers to showcase independent voices, environmental narratives, and global perspectives. And this brings me to the task at hand. All Living Things Environmental Film Festival, ALT EFF, the National Gallery of Modern Art, Mumbai, and Avid Learning present Stories That Inspire, Cinema for Environmental Change. A special thank you to Ms. Nidhi Chaudhary, Director of the NGMA Mumbai, and Deputy Curator Shruti Das for hosting us tonight. So without further ado, please put your hands together to welcome our distinguished speakers. Filmmaker and producer, Koval Bhatia. Artist, author, animator, and filmmaker, Suresh Eriyat. Programming Director, ALT EFF, Anarky. And our moderator for the evening, usual at Avid, I must say, so, and a great supporter, film critic and reporter at scroll.in, Nandini Ramanath. Thank you all for being here. Over to you, Nandini, and look forward to an exciting discussion.
Thank you, Asad, so much. And thank you, Avid, NGMA, ALT EFF, Ministry of Culture. Thank you for hosting this event. As a journalist and somebody who reviews films and shows for a living, I have been following and watching a lot of sort of films on the environment. One of my favorite genres is animation, of which Suresh is a great practitioner. You should follow his channel on YouTube to see the things he does. And Miyazaki, the great Japanese filmmaker, has actually made some of the greatest films about the damage that humans do to the environment. I also have questions on whether the filmmaking, the practice of cinema itself is, production of cinema rather itself is wasteful. It's one of the questions I do want to ask. So I'll start off by asking my fellow panelists. As Asad said, the climate crisis seems overwhelming. We feel powerless in the face of what we read and what we see every day. Can films or documentaries actually deal with this crisis in ways that are relevant, let alone empowering? Films often take very long to be made. They come out after the damage has been done, so to speak. So what impact can they really have?
Let me just start by saying it is unquestionable and undeniable the kind of impact that films or art in general can have. Over the years of doing this work with ALT EFF and also in my own independent practice as a writer and journalist, the thing that has really allowed me to become a more informed citizen, to find some sense of solace, some sense of camaraderie and friendship, and also take inspiration has been art. I'll give you a few examples of some of the films that I have watched and really loved and enjoyed. Both Koval and Suresh's films are also, their entire filmography is incredible, and I'm a huge fan of that. That goes without saying. But there are a couple of films, like for example, even though it takes many years and it takes many decades to actually materialize sometimes, there was a film called Seeds of Vandana Shiva that we screened at Film Club last year. And Vandana Shiva is such a well-known and well-celebrated public figure in the world of food sovereignty. But yet watching this 1 hour documentary about her life created a lot of aha moments, I would say, in audience members. And that sort of aha moment is something that can change behaviors and does change behaviors. I had a fashion designer in the audience who generally tends to use, worked on very, very prominent Hollywood and Bollywood productions, who tends to use organic cotton in her work instead of, let's say, polyester. And she thought that was enough. But watching this film and participating in this discussion gave her this new knowledge that, hey, perhaps the cotton seeds that are being used, the way they're being cultivated, the sort of cycle of debt and pesticide usage they create is also part of the impact that the materials I use in my work are having outside of, let's say, just moving away from polyester or natural fabrics. Something like that. We also had watched this beautiful film last year called Deep Rising, which allowed people to then engage with the beauty and unknown, the complete mystery of deep sea creatures, while also thinking about the impact that electric vehicles and the green economy can have on biodiversity. So it just brings a lot of nuance, is what I'm trying to say, I think, to the conversation. And yeah.
Koval has produced a fantastic documentary, Against the Tide, by Sarnik Kaur. If anybody has a Mubi subscription, it's on Mubi right now, right? It's won a whole bunch of awards. It could have been and should have been perhaps shortlisted as India's entry in the documentary Oscar category. But anyway, it's a great film. Koval, could you talk to, the questions I had asked, but could you also sort of explore your experience with producing that documentary?
So Against the Tide is about two Kohli fishermen from Mumbai and their lives and their challenges unfolding against the larger backdrop of climate change and overfishing. And what truly drew me towards producing that film was that it's really hard to understand what is climate change, right? You can go the Al Gore way and say an inconvenient truth, and you can scare people. But after a point, shock, horror, and awe, they kind of get redundant. People, of course, as we all know, read a lot of news. We're constantly exposed to a lot of headlines. On the other hand, if you humanize something, if you really take the time to enter somebody's life, both as a filmmaker, but also when you're watching it as a film audience, there is a certain amount of empathy where their problems don't suddenly feel so theoretical or hypothetical. They begin to resonate in a way where you fully go, aha, if this could happen to this person, it is not so far from my own doorstep. And I think that's really what especially non-fiction cinema tries to do more and more when it comes to climate stories, is to try and show the very lived day-to-day impact, the lived experience of what some of these notional calamities are. Because it's not like there's going to be an actual 100-foot wave, which is a decent film as well. But it's actually about how your families are affected, how something as simple as the fish you eat is affected, the way in which you relate to one another is affected. And when you start to see climate or any kind of socio-political phenomenon impacting very simple everyday relationships and activities, I think there is generally a more sense of urgency that emerges. It's not a quick fix. It's not something that we assume is going to make a radical change, but I think it's building towards a larger sense of long-term lived empathy. Yeah.
Suresh, humor is something that you use brilliantly. It's almost like a strategy, like a strategy that you use, right, to get people. Tell us about your latest film, particularly the animation.
Desi Un
Yeah.
is the latest.
It's
film.
wonderful because it's showing at the ALT EFF, festival.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks for this panel discussion. I mean, I think it's such a relevant topic, and I'll throw a little bit of light on my views on what you asked. But I'll tell you, Desi Un was a film that was made with wool to talk about the kind of threat that the pastoral community is going through in India, with wool having no value, where India, a very strange statistics came out of this film. That is, India is probably the second largest producer of wool in the world, but we dispose of almost 85% of it, and we import wool, and we are the number one importer of wool in the world. So this was a very glaring sort of a stat that had to be brought to people for them to understand. And that's why this film was made. And it was entirely made with wool and using animation, stop motion animation. How films can influence a change. I believe, so we have, before every film, feature film of ours, there is that one guy who comes coughing with, he's got cancer, smoking, and, that's such grotesque images are shown with, really scary to be scary, but mostly bordering towards funny, where a family is shown as traumatized by this man getting cancer out of smoking or tobacco chewing. But it does nothing to people. It does not make any difference to people whatsoever, because it is probably ticking a box that was required, but not the requirement of bringing a change. And that's where I think I would, again, go back to Miyazaki's film, whether it was Princess Mononoke or any of those films that Miyazaki-san made in Japan, Studio Ghibli films we are talking about. I hope you are familiar with them. They induce these changes from childhood, and it kind of makes a big difference in the way you grow up to be a responsible person, having minimal impact on the world or the ecosystem that you're living in. And that is a very different sort of a learning or induction that is required with cinema. And I think that sort of power is what I would consider as what films should do, not shock people. Even our film also shocks people with the stat, but whether some people also would be influenced by it and makes a bit of a difference in their behavioral change, then I think we have won the battle. But I think the long-term changes have to be seen by filmmakers as well, that it's not an immediate effect that we can bring about. And films do bring about change with time. And there are several such films that have, when you look at it, we in India, we lived a very sustainable way of living. It was with the times of change and the influences that are that we have been shown as aspirations. Our ways have changed, and we started, actually depleting our surroundings. So I think it requires a reversal way of induction. What we've been influenced by is something that we need to reverse and get back to. I'm talking just about India right now, because it's a big ecosystem.
So I think sort of strategies of how you make your films, the sort of approaches that you take. It can be an observational documentary, like Against the Tide, if I'm sort of correct. I don't want to classify it as that, but it's an observational film. The filmmaker's intervention is not really that strong. And you have outright activist films where the filmmaker is part of the movement or part of people's struggles and so on. Keeping aside the topic at hand, all three of you all have been involved with filmmaking. You all have gone to film festivals, watched tons of films, you program festival. What kind of messaging works the best in your view? So what kind of messaging has the most impact?
Yeah, no, thank you for that question. I think what both Koval and what Suresh said is that there is a limit to how much the doom and gloom narrative can work, right? We're living in a world where people are already terrified and already pushed to the edge. So it is sort of a conundrum within, let's say, programming teams, for instance, as to whether we can or should or have is it responsible or ethical for us to put this kind of information in front of an audience and trigger them, so to speak, with some of the more hard-hitting or violent imagery that frankly is a fact of the world that we live in today. But I think what we do is we try to create this mix of things, right? And that's also where curation plays a role. It's like you try to assess get as much information as you can about the kind of audience there is. Like perhaps this audience might be able to take a 40-minute hard-hitting film followed by a quick debrief conversation, followed by, I think, something like perhaps Desi Own. What that does is it brings in this element of fun and this element of... And the thing is that Desi Own is a subject, it is a vastly complex subject, right? In climate circles, we use these words like polycrisis and hyperobjects, which is what we're dealing with right now. There is this butterfly effect of things, right? So with Desi Own, for instance, if I were to pull at the threads, no pun intended, it would be we're talking about livelihood loss, we're talking about pastoralism, we're talking about sheep diversity, we're talking about the coexistence between farmers and pastoralists, we're talking about so many different things, and we're talking about local economies, right? And not being part of this industrial. So I have two options. I can make a film, as we discussed earlier, that sort of just lays this out in a dry manner, and there might be people that are takers for it. I, for instance, totally love a factual driven thing. I can consume that, but not everybody can. And that's where I think a film like Desi Oon would come in. Whereas a film like Against the Tide, again, as you mentioned, observational, very intimate and beautiful and reliant on these delicate human relationships, just very gently allows you to come into this world. And then you can sort of, if you really want to get into it, you wet your feet and you want to get into a subject, you can.
I mean, it's cinema. It's such a vast field. And I think there's space for all of those. I do think activist films are very important as well, because they capture a moment which is necessary to capture. They capture people's very specific, very imminent crises, whereby cinema acts as witness. I don't necessarily think that activist films have a wide audience anymore, simply because we're just living in a world where we're bombarded with a lot of activism of every kind. And so So at the same time, while I believe it's important to make, I'm not so sure anymore that it's working. And I do think that's why, especially even within India, there's been a larger kind of movement towards this observational, almost narrative style. Because, well, we want our films to be watched. We want them to be screened for people to actually, say, oh, I really, really want to sit through 90, 97, 100 minutes of this. And therefore, there is a narrativization, there is an attempt to make them compelling, to have characters that one can relate to build worlds, all the things that are generally seen as the domain of narrative fiction cinema. That said, I do also think that factual entertainment, counterintuitively, I don't like it. Personally, I'm not a fan, but I've realized that for a lot of people, it's actually very useful and helpful because attention spans, it's very direct, it's easy. Somebody can break down a very, very significant issue and you're able to watch it. And so I think that people who are not necessarily consuming cinema or art, but are interested in knowing about a subject, they actually really enjoy. Like European broadcasters till date love funding factual cinema because people want to know that. So I guess my answer is all of it. We need all of them for different reasons.
Yeah, I completely agree that it has to be a mixture of everything. It can't be like, we shouldn't make such films. But one of the things when I rewind and think about where we were growing up, we had like quite, there were a lot of myths that used to float around, which was because absence of facts and absence of access to facts. Things were, a lot of belief systems were there in a small town where I grew up also. Like, okay, you can't kill a rat because it's, some god's vehicle, or every animal or a creature or even a pest had something to do with some character where you can't touch them. So there were so many such things. So you will not excessively kill or, break that whole balance in the ecology. And something that films can also do is to create such worlds and the respect for things. And again, I would go back to Japanese cinema and animation only because they have very well managed to build these narratives which are so believable. They also are so much ahead in technology and other spaces, but still they have those traditional beliefs and disciplines and everything, where excessive, of course, I'm not talking about some other excesses that they do, but in general practice, people are really contained. You don't use so much of, you just leave minimal footprint of carbon footprint or any of those things. It's the way that you are designing your life. So films have that capability to do that. But yeah, again, like activist cinema or factual things are very immediate. It's like at gunpoint sort of films. But if we have a great mixture of slow induction, sort of slow cooking, sort of a way of changing things, that those films will have a larger impact, not for our generation, not for us to experience, but for the future. Like maybe 50 years later, the kids that would have a radically different way of, looking at the world.
May I quickly add that, we're towing two worlds right now, right? Storytelling and climate. And we're living in this climate emergency where there really isn't time to sort of mull and whatever. But that being said, films or art of any kind give you this space to hold all of the information and hold all of the sort of emotions that you've perhaps been bombarded with in the news media, right? And so I think it also becomes essential to watch and be part of communities watching these kinds of films so that you can maybe come and assimilate some of the things that you have been thinking about or talking about.
I'm going to ask you all for like your own sort of films that you all feel do this the best, your own list of films. this is a slightly devil's advocate question. The act of producing cinema, whether it's a short film, a feature, anything, can arguably be described as wasteful. Many people involved, carbon footprint, refuse, garbage, all kinds of problems. We regularly read about, crews that have gone and messed up, I don't know, this monument or that sort of ecologically dangerous, fragile zone and so on. How can filmmakers themselves be responsible, whether or not you're making a film about the environment? Are there sort of best practices to be adopted where filmmakers themselves can show that they are sort of respectful of, and cognizant of the fact that they can cause a lot of damage?
I personally am the wrong person to ask. I think the biggest crew I've ever had is 30 people, and everybody cleans up after themselves and they get yelled at if they don't. But yeah, of course,
Is that something you all discussed before? It's just like...
No,
is it sort of laid down? Because a lot of people don't do this.
Yeah, it's laid down. And some of this is because also independent, a lot of indie, purely, I'm talking about documentary or fiction, indie cinema is small crews by default. And it's not like, there's not so much of a hierarchy. There is generally a sense of, we all know what we more or less, why we're there. We're there, not there for money, clearly. So, we're there for some shared purpose. And, there's a certain kind of camaraderie, whether it's with the cam attendants or if it's with the DOP, there's conversation. And so, yeah, these things are a lot easier. I think, obviously, when you talk about bigger sets, it becomes harder. I remember the whiplash I got when I tried to get giant jugs of water instead of giving smaller water bottles. And I was producing as well as directing, and all I was doing was dealing with complaints about these sustainability measures on that particular project. So I think, but at the same time, I will be the devil's advocate and say that, look, life is wasteful. Every time we step out of the house, we are consuming resource. And I don't generally think that paper straws and so on and so forth are the solution. I think it's generally about asking whether you need to do that thing or not, whether you need that extravagance, whether you need to be doing that. Can you deal with a little discomfort? And unfortunately, if you ask me, I will say, yes, I'm happy to deal with a lot of discomfort. I'm a documentary filmmaker, but I'm also not the one creating a lot of that extravagance. And the people that are, I don't think they're asking or being asked that question. So maybe that question needs to be asked. And then we're talking about capitalism. And then we're just talking about a whole larger problem. Yep. Yeah, so that's just a very...
Suresh, is animation wasteful?
No, see, even in the shoots, we do commercials. We do commercial shoots. So, for example, earlier, if I had to go from Bandra to Mud Island for a shoot, there will be a battalion of cars that would go all the way. It's just a ferry across. Since a couple of years, when we are shooting that side, we've all started taking that. Instead of, it's a conscious thing. All the crew, everyone is very consciously, coming to the other Versova jetty, taking the ferry and going, there are rickshaws. Some people take shared rickshaws, whatever. So, blending in is one way to kind of, otherwise that at least 5-6 Innovas are just going all the way across. Which is it's something that people are become sensitive. Our line producers themselves say that, sir, please, you just come like this. So there is nothing, no vehicle for you, just come normally. So and the water, again, so much of water bottles are wasted. We give everyone one water bottle each. But these are all small steps. But people generally question and I think they get little sensitive about the process. In our studio, when we are in animation films, when it comes to people, some of them are not even ordering food because they bring plastic when you order from Swiggy or so. Then people prefer to just walk out and eat somewhere rather than ordering in. So I've seen that people are generally very responsible. When you create certain value systems, people also understand and they show you better examples than what you can prescribe.
Can I, sorry, just jump in? I'll also talk as a producer, because when you're a producer, especially looking at the bottom line or the P&L, sometimes it's as simple as if studios...
P&L being...
profit and loss, the bottom line. Sorry. Purely from a financial perspective, if there, I mean, this is obviously a very far-reaching thing, but I know that if there were incentives, and this goes into the space more of policy and larger conversations with studios, but the day you started to give, if you start to give production houses and producers an incentive or a subsidy for making their productions green, suddenly a lot of productions will be green. And I mean, there's generally, that's how a lot of, well, fortunately, unfortunately, that's how a lot of social change or general attitudinal change is impacted. But if you were to say, okay, we'll give you an additional line item, we will allocate an additional line item for having a green production, a lot more people would do it. So
You don't, there's nothing like that right now?
not in the client and the advertising work that I worked in, definitely not, but also not generally in the larger cinema space.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what they've both said. I mean, not really to get into whataboutery so much as to just recognize what is necessary and where the bulk of the pollution is coming from. We're talking about, let's say, a global plastics treaty being signed and being given the green light on a geopolitical level. And we're talking about like commercial cinema really operating on like an insane scale. When we compare that to the kind of films, even if we're comparing it to, let's say, like a really high budget documentary film that requires a crew to fly around the world, use drones, use like special machinery, perhaps even use AI or animation. However, if that film narratively is having a certain impact, you know, you're also kind of baking that into the, I would say, the cost of actually creating that piece of work. So it is a little like confusing, but I think we should also think about it as the way that we think about individual action versus systemic action within the larger conversation as well.
It's said in Bombay, I don't know how true this is, that a lot of children don't burst crackers around the time of Diwali. And this has been, it's been sort of slowly over the years, this change has come because it's been taught to them in schools. And a lot of families now have pets who are terrified of, rightly so, of the noise and the pollution. So that is kind of proof that if something is, you're inducted into it, as you say, it's, you know, it does kind of have an impact perhaps over time. For a lot of people who love cinema and follow cinema, the festival is a space where you get exposed to all kinds of different anarchic ideas. You know, you can sneak into a darkened hall and watch something truly radical, experimental, whatever. Nobody's policing you and so on. A lot of us have got, you know, my eyes have opened to many truths because of film festivals. Are there enough film festivals specifically on the environment? We've got all kinds of thematic festivals. Are there enough festivals? Are there enough audiences going to these festivals? Or are people still seeing the environment as something that is still a little bit, you know, maybe it belongs to the world of academia? You know, is it, to come back to that first question, is it sort of entertaining enough, or is it, you know, can I sort of devote an entire day to watching films only about the environment? So we'd like to start with you.
Are there enough environmental film festivals? I don't really know if I have an answer to that. I would say that there can be many, many more spaces where the environment and our role in it and our contribution to positively or negatively can be explored. But it's also interesting because it's like it's rapidly changing. Year on year, the amount of people actually being plugged into the conversation, I think, is increasing dramatically. Perhaps I'm in a bubble, I don't know. But I also feel as if more and more, even allied festivals, whether they're music festivals or, you know, retreats, they have that component of wellness and sustainability baked into them as well. Even real estate now, I think, is little bit, you know, sort of moving in that direction. So I do think that, yes, there is, you know, you can watch an entire day of like environmental cinema and be completely enraptured and feel the whole gamut of emotions, and you can come away feeling, in fact, more inspired and more like capable and more hopeful, even if that's a bit cheesy, but even more hopeful than when you did walk in. That being said, there is a lot of sort of like fear, I would say, that's associated with like going to watch an issue film, because I think there are a lot of preconceived notions about what that could look like. There's a lot of fear in people that, you know, they're going to be subject to something very serious or very traumatic or like, you know, yeah.
I mean, I can respond to that. Like, interestingly, the last 3 years of documentaries at Sundance, All That Breathes, then Our Film Against the Tide, then Nocturnes, all three went to Sundance, all three won awards, all three are about the environment. But would you call them environmental films? I mean, you can definitely call them environmental films, but is that all they are? And I think that's where I often take issue with, like, you know, this depiction of, is this an environmental film? Because, like, it sounds to me like Suresh's film is also an animation, it's also comedy.
It's about life.
It's about life. So I think, yes, it's very good to have themed festivals because it's great for getting together people who want to, like, band around a particular issue and have an interest. But I think for me, like, I like to see these as films that, yes, also contain a larger conversation about climate, but, you know, they do clearly appeal to a very vast and very wide-ranging audience. So I don't know. I just feel like it's a little bit of a double-edged sword. This thematizing of festivals.
I mean, it works. It works for us in the sense that, like, you know, we sometimes think of ourselves as environmentalists at the heart of it, and then cinephiles. So I guess it works because there's that mission to, like, catalyze climate action. But when we're programming and when we're watching films, we're just watching films. You know, we're just watching really, really great stories. And there are, you know, the connection to the environment or the didactic nature of a film is sometimes thinner and sometimes, you know, very on the face. Yeah.
So my point of view is that we should have people, audience should be there at the festivals. You know, one of the sad things that I see in many of these festivals is that there's hardly any audience. You know, it's not halls brimming in with audience wanting to see such films. Even there is a dearth of film festivals, and I really feel themed film festivals like environmental film festivals should be there, because it's time that you see a compilation of how the world is going about it. You know, I went for a film festival. First time I went for an environmental film festival was in I think 2008 or something. One of our films was also there in Torino, in Italy. There's a festival called Cinema Ambient. And there, the kind of films that we saw of how people with little land, with just a terrace or a balcony, how they are able to grow things on their own for their sustenance. It was inspirational that time. You know, you would think that, oh, we have very little space, but what people are doing around the world, if that is seen by us in India, or, you know, it will be inspirational for us to, like, really do some difference. So I think curation is very important. What sort of films you bring in. There are several films in India, several people in India who are practicing great, you know, the activism themselves, but those are not documented for people to know about them. So definitely such themed festivals should be there so that there could be some funds that can come about to nurture such filmmakers who can go out and make such films to be shared with the audiences. That'll really help. And yeah, it's imperative that these values are so pertinent that it'll also reflect in normal other films as well, which is a good thing, which is just a bonus. But themed film festivals are important, but that shouldn't be putting off people. That, oh, this is an environmental thing, so I don't want to go for it. You know, that sort of thing shouldn't be there. So it's a little sensitive sort of a subject. But in India, we need really more festivals with more footfall. I don't see in documentary film festivals attended by many people.
I mean, there is that question of always of, especially independent filmmakers, of distribution. We talk about these wonderful films. We're going to name a lot of wonderful films today, and then I'm sure people are going to come up to you after this and say, "Where can I watch this, sir, or man, or whatever?" At this point, there are and there aren't platforms to take your films to, the average person who loves cinema and who's perhaps not doesn't have the time and the bandwidth to attend a festival. So we live in an age where supposedly everything is accessible. We keep touting streaming as this big this amazing thing that has opened up, and it actually hasn't opened up avenues for independent cinema particularly. At this point in time, how many avenues are there for you all to take what you make out there? Are they adequate? And are they, again, like with environmental practices while making films, are there certain things that we need to do to make such films more accessible to people?
I think almost 1 or 2 panels happen every year. A title distribution is broken. I've spoken on at least 1 or 2.
Is it? Do you agree with that?
Yeah, it's completely fundamentally broken. And the funny thing is, we go to Europe and have these panels about distribution is broken, and we're like, no, wait till you see what we have back home, because the truth is that we make these films and they travel the world and they win all these awards and they're on BBC or POV or HBO even, but there's no way to actually show them here in India. I remember writing to almost every single streamer, every single platform saying, hey, look at all these awards we got. Now we even got the top one in Mami. Would you like our film now? The theaters were really packed. For a change, there was footfall. Crickets. Nobody. It's a feature documentary. Nobody wants to watch it. And I think there's, honestly, I think I'm numb to this conversation because it's been had over and over and over again. But the truth is that we as a country have also kind of not really kept the independent and cinema viewing experience alive. Because for me, it's always, I'm not amazed or pleasantly surprised when you go to a random town somewhere in Germany and your theater's packed. I feel a little tinge of remorse. I feel a little bit embarrassed for myself as an Indian artist, because I really want that too here. Because the truth is that I've heard this said a lot. Indian filmmakers, they want to make films for festivals and global audiences, but you haven't arrived truly till you've had at least some guys whistling in a theater at something you didn't even think was possible to whistle at. When you show it back in your own homeland in the native language, that's when you feel the proudest. We never really get to have that, not really. And I think we've talked about, a lot of us, we often sit and we discuss, okay, so what is so wrong? And I think it's that there has to be state supported distribution. There is no way around it. The reason it exists, if I were to use the films that I produce as a case study, they are, if a Netflix or an HBO hasn't bought them, it's still fine. There is a BBC, there is a PBS, there is a France TV, there is an RTS. There are state broadcasters and they're programming films from across the world on a variety of subjects as long as they think they're good films. And I think we have to ask for that at some point. We can't just rely on streamers, because streamers, they showed a lot of promise. They went very quickly algorithmic, and algorithms support the quickest turnarounds and the most fast-moving product, which obviously is not necessarily the same as supporting cinema or art or whatever. So I think we do have to do that. And the other thing is, a lot of us do go guerrilla as well. I have friends who just at some point said, you know what, we'll just put our film on YouTube. At least that way people will watch it. Because what's the point of gatekeeping it, hoping someday it'll get acquisition when it's clearly not going to. So I'm sorry to sound really frustrated, but I don't really see any particular hopeful outcome at this moment when it comes to distribution.
I think I pretty much agree with, that this point of view is we also rely on YouTube and other places. Just put up the film so maximum people see it. That's the. It's you spend a lot of energy and money to make a film, but you're just giving it out there for people to see. But I don't see any organized way of distribution that's happening, and maybe we shouldn't digress our conversation into that sort of rant. We should be talking about.
No, I also think it's important because festivals have now they have a market aspect and a tie-up. So, Anaga, ALT EFF, the idea is you come there, and by the way, it's in December. It's happening in Versova, the Bombay bit of it. If anyone's in Bangalore in December, it's happening in Bangalore. But the idea is you come there, you just watch and take in all these films, soak in all these films. But there must be filmmakers or audiences who come and say, hey, what next? What after this?
Yeah, it's tough. It's rough out there.
So tough.
It's really rough out there. We're also a really small festival, and hopefully in the next few years we do have dreams of inculcating a market and creating that. But really, it really feels like we're starting from scratch, which is also why the festival exists, because that culture and that marketplace don't exist at all for consuming, particularly these documentary films in general or indie films in general, but particularly environmental narratives as well. I mean, we've had small wins. Not small wins. We've had small, medium-sized, and large wins, all of them, right? So if you think about it, the last 2 years at our, we did these big opening night events at Liberty Cinema, and we had between 500 and 700 people each year come just for that one thing. It's huge, for a setup where we were in 2023, we were just 4 people full time. Today we're 9 people full time, right? And so for something that's small to say, okay, we're bringing in those many crowds, there's some movement happening. I'll tell you that much. This year was really exciting for us because right at the start of the year itself, we secured a 40 lakh lump sum grant from the Mercedes-Benz Research and Development Institute for us to give to one documentary environmental filmmaker, which is huge, which is absolutely huge. It's going through the Green Stories pipeline in November. It'll be announced soon. And we will be able to give that one person, whoever they are, one team, we'll be able to give them the support that they need to complete their film, as well as post-produce, offer some mentorship, and offer some distribution. It's not nothing. It's one film, sure, but it's not nothing. And it's hopefully the beginning of us trying to unlock some funding within India for Indian filmmakers, which doesn't exist at all. Where are you going to find a 40 lakh fund in this country? Nowhere. It's super, super difficult to unlock. Then streaming platform hack is difficult. We have tried over the last 2 years to also speak with some of these streaming platforms, and as Koval said, crickets, right? They don't want to take nonfiction, they don't want to take documentary, they don't want to take things that people are not interested in. So it becomes very difficult to go that route. Abroad, let's say there's Water Bear Network that might be distributing films online and or various other places. But we're trying this model, and I'm shamelessly plugging it here. I hope you go and tell 10 people about it. But we're trying this model this year called a watch party model, which is democratizing, decentralizing, giving the free reign to people, right? All you have to do is log into the ALT EFF website between December 4th and 14th. You can buy a curated package, depending on the kind of experience you want to have. It's very, very affordable, and you can host your own event. And we're hoping that that's a DIY kind of distribution method. It doesn't replace state support, not even close, but it's something.
I also want to add that we had our distribution and festival run, and then we had our film at ALT EFF. Actually, I had 2 films at ALT EFF.
Yeah.
And that was really fun because, it went to different smaller places where the invariable question you're always asked is, oh, you are making films, where can I see? And here, Bangalore, this day, Delhi, this day, this day, this day. I finally had an answer, which, like I said, after a point, most of us, even if I'm not even talking about distribution as a revenue source. I'm talking about distribution for the sake of getting your film out there, being watched by people you love and care about, or also this imaginary audience that you think will like it. And I think that's where a lot of the time festivals are the key. And it certainly was for us, like, we were able to get it into smaller towns and spaces we hadn't actually had the resource to show it around. So I think festivals are there, but I will come back to, I think we as audiences also need to demand better. Against the Tide was the highest viewership film at the 25 Shades of Dark slot on France TV, in a country known for not liking any other language or culture except their own. We were the most watched feature doc on that slot. We surely there are, among the 1.5 billion people, there are enough people who would watch this film happily. It's just about, I guess, there's something, when we say something's broken, there's a missing link. We generally don't think that our films, and again, I'm not talking about the documentary, I'm not talking about environmental, I'm talking about films in general. There's something fundamentally broken where once a film goes abroad, it does very well, there's intrigue about it. But I think we have to ask, we have to show interest. I don't know how it works, but I guess I'm assuming a lot of people in this audience are cinephiles. And I think it needs to be shown in some way. I don't know, like there needs to be a larger conversation, but I think it has to come from cinema audiences showing and expressing their preference, because when you hear the crickets, sometimes it's also accompanied by, yeah, nobody wants to watch these films. And it would be nice to be able to say, no, here, we can prove that people do want to watch it. So, yeah. No solutions, but sorry.
Okay, I'd like to, so this is the last question and we throw it open to the audience after that, but just other films, especially in recent years, documentaries, features, whatever genre, whatever type, that have spoken to you about climate change, the ecology, or just living in this crazy world that we're living in right now? Would you recommend? Would you throw out a few recommendations?
Yeah, happily. But I'll let you guys go first.
The recent film, I think Flow is an amazing film.
Beautiful. That Animator, the film that won the
Oscar.
Animation Oscar. It's a dialogue-free film with a cat, which I can't resist a film with a cat, but
Yeah, I
it's
think
on Prime Video.
That film was really overwhelming as an experience, and I'm really glad that it made it to the Oscar and got the global. I mean, there are several of. I mean, that's in the recent times. Otherwise, most of Miyazaki's films, they have that sense of inspiration. There's a clear underlying, message that kind of moves people, not with like any persuasion, but naturally they kind of. I know my son, who's grown up watching Miyazaki's films, have become such a sensitive individual when it comes to all these aspects, and there are several others also. I could see that so that would be an example that I would cite. I mean, Flow is definitely an amazing recent experience. There are several others that I watched where it's subliminally there, this messaging. But I mean, Flow is coming at the top of my mind.
There's a non-fiction feature film called Soundtrack to a Coup d'etat, which
I think it's available on Geo Hotstar for whoever wants to watch.
It is now?
Yeah, I think so. It's an HBO film.
Yeah, it's I think one of the most brilliant films in terms of form I've seen in forever. And I think I showed it to a couple of friends. So I was doing some jury duty and I had to watch it. And I said, oh God, this is going to be, it's a 2.5 hour long documentary. And it says it's all archives. Can you give me company? And then, we actually all sat and watched it. And I was surprised because they were also watching it. And afterwards, we were blown away because it's a film that uses the very, very very cool medium of jazz music to break down, in some essence, the history of empire and colonialism. But it's so entertaining, it's magical form-wise and musically, and I think that's also for me like a very good idea of how nonfiction can become very accessible without necessarily getting didactic. Yeah. Soundtrack to a coup d'etat.
It's on Geo Hotstar.
Many films come to mind. I will also just say, because Miyazaki has come up so many times, almost an auspicious thing. We have a film called Miyazaki, Spirit of Nature, which is going to be part of ALT EFF this year. It's very, very select screenings. There'll be one in Bombay, one in Bangalore, that's all. So catch it if you can, because it goes into exactly this, how this person and this like great animator, this entire body of work, embodied this ethos of nature and how he also lived that. So that's an opportunity. I'll take the chance to name like maybe a couple of films we've programmed that are available freely to watch. One is called Pleistocene Park, which won the Best of Festival 2 years ago. Not unconventional at all in the way that it's told, but a real raw documentary shot over a period of 10 years. Really funny, really heartfelt, about this relationship between a father and son scientist duo in the Siberian Arctic, where he's taking this like crazy massive like swing and saying, you know what, if I bring 1,000 four-footed creatures to the Siberian Arctic, they will sort of dig it up and like eat food and therefore help keep that portion of land frozen, which will prevent carbon from escaping as the permafrost melts, right? Like that's essentially the premise of the film, and it is hilarious because it is just the people in them are hilarious, and that's like it's available on YouTube. You can Pleistocene Park. Pleistocene Park. Yeah. So that's a great film. And so many films. Another film that really blew my mind, again, just for like its cinematic like merit, was My Mercury. I don't know if any of you caught that. That is not available as easily to watch. But it was essentially a documentary film, but made made by the sister of this conservationist, using real-time footage, but also archival footage. Really stunning. And there are a couple of animations that are incredible, like feature-length animations, actually. One is called Savages, and the other one is Butterflies, which we will also show. I promise I'm not just like plugging the festival. They're really good films, but they're also coming up to watch only in person.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much. The discussion was so wide-ranging that I'm supposed to give concluding remarks, but I'm
Can we
at a
ask
loss
you
of
to
words.
also share a couple of films, as you're the resident film?
I'm mostly bound by films that I've watched recently and written about. Against the Tide, I'd interviewed the filmmaker Sarnik Kaur. She's also very sort of articulate and has really thought through what she's doing. Nocturnes, another film that you mentioned, is a wonderful film about, again, who would have thought, right? I mean, a bunch of scientists sitting in a remote part of India were studying sort of moths or something. And the film is really about the world we're in, and it's very beautiful. And I somehow find myself watching Princess Mononoke very often. I don't know, when I'm feeling sad, I put that on. Because Miyazaki's Princess Mononoke, almost his entire catalog is on Netflix, by the way. It's fantastic. But that's a film about, it's not didactic. It is a message, but it's not a message. It's about coexistence.
It's like, again, myths.
Yeah, and it's about coexistence. Neither group wins. There are 3 people, actually, 3 groups. Neither of them wins, neither of them loses. They have to live with each other, and I think Miyazaki tells us that we have to live with each other. There's no happy ending on either side, So these are among the films. And I just recently watched, I was just talking to some, it's not about the environment, but I think it's about the world we live in. One Battle After Another, the Paul Thomas Anderson film, is such a beautiful film about, activism, love, war, revolution, all of it. But somehow, I would hope with caution. I think that's one of the things I've got from that film and I got from this panel discussion. That hope, but with caution. And a great man never said, be the change you want to be. But apparently that's also something that perhaps comes out of the conversation with you all. So thank you so much for this wonderful chat. Questions, please.
Could you repeat the last movie that you mentioned, please?
So sweet. One Battle After Another. It's running right now. It's in cinemas. It's by a great American filmmaker called Paul Thomas Anderson, P.T.
When you
Anderson.
say running now, where?
It's running and you can go to Book My Show and check. It's
Okay.
got Leo DiCaprio,
All right.
star value.
Wow.
He plays a washed out revolutionary who's like a sort of stoner, and his daughter gets kidnapped, which takes him back to his crazy radical activist past. But it's really a film about many things, but our cause is worthy of living or dying for. That's one of the things that you take away from the film. Formally, it's beautiful. It's a beautifully made film. So, yeah, it's one of the best films I've ever seen. So, yeah.
No, I think thanks for that. And one of the things you guys mentioned is that the concept is a little new and nascent, right? Like you're all starting on this journey. Are there any subcategories in the environment movies that is it directly to do with, climate change particularly as one category, or is it just the other thing? And the third wave could be, I'm just thinking out loud, which is it that an impact onto social change? Are there any categories that you think about?
I think what has been mentioned a lot is that, no, it's not necessarily an environmental film, it's about life. And that's so true, right? Because environment is not a vertical, it is a horizontal. That's how we look at it, right? So if you want, you can look at gender, you can look at labor rights, you can look at livelihood, you can look at land rights, you can look at livelihoods, sustainability, food. There are a lot of ways in which you can approach that subject. It's not necessarily, of course, science, climate science is one of them. It's as varied as the world we live in.
There are, in genre fiction now, we're reinterpreting genres. Zombie films are now widely considered to be films about the ecology and the environment in some way, right? Godzilla is what is who is Godzilla? Godzilla is a reaction to our stupidity. So, yeah.
Quick question, something that has been running in my mind for a while. So I work with NGOs and I work with foundations who sometimes fund to make the films that we make. And they have a lot of on ground, like grassroots presence. Is there any way, one of the things we really struggle with to make them understand how storytelling can be the impact and can have, there are two parts to this question. One is, can they be something that can give us the grassroots screenings or grassroots, presence, show it to people? And secondly, is there any way to advocate them as to how this can be really something that can bring impact? Because a lot of times they approach saying, they want to put it on social media, but that's not the only thing that they can do, and they can do a lot more. So are there any ways we can advocate them on that?
Just privately between us, Rujita, 6th November, your masterclass is scheduled for this particular subject.
Yes.
Rujita is a part of a fellowship that and we have an impact campaigning session. But yes,
Really
this is
looking forward.
I think a film festival individual should answer, because we're always scratching our heads. Like, how do we get the idea of impact screenings and community screenings? Interestingly, I feel like I remember Anand Patwardhan used to do True Blue impact and community screenings in the truest sense of the word. And then I think there's, again, I don't think a lot of people do that anymore as much. And now we're going all the way back full circle to what is impact, what is community, and is that something you think film festivals can kind of support while involving non-profits? Because eventually they're the ones with the biggest on-ground reach.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's a really important aspect of what we do. And it informs every aspect of how we make the festival, right? Starting with the decentralized model, which then allows us to go outside of these like elite fortress, like, tier one cities, tier two cities, and actually take it to places. So we have held a number of rural screenings. We partner with a lot of CSOs and NGOs to make that happen as well. A lot of the screenings that we've done are not always public either, because they're going to specific communities. Like last year, we had with Fungi Foundation, we held a screening in Tura, a village in Meghalaya, and it saw 300 people coming in. And like essentially somebody brought a jump cable attached to a car, like projected, like we send them a projector, they showed the film, right? And so I think that it's sort of like a feedback loop that it creates, where the more you take the films to various communities, the more they appreciate and understand that culture and maybe feel sold to actually start creating their own work. And then, of course, it's also about capacity building, right? And it's also about like, okay, maybe you don't have a DSLR or something, but maybe you've got a phone camera, right? Like maybe I can teach you composition. I can teach you like some techniques. So it's two things. One, just do the thing. Right, and by doing making the piece of work itself, I think anybody from any community will see the value in that piece of art that's been created. So when it comes to the curation aspect of it, also. The reason we have so many films each year is because we're trying to make sure that there is something that caters to every or many demographics that we can go to, right? So go online and you can just see what's there. We've also got a free film archive that you can use at any point of time. And a lot of regional language films are in there as well. And if you don't find something, then write to us. Maybe we have something that we can specially get the rights for and do that. Yeah.
We have time for just two more questions, if there are two more questions.
Commercial films have their own way of promoting themselves, teasers, trailers, film critics, etc., before the movie is actually shown. So when it comes to your environmental films, do you all have marketing strategies, because unless you do that, how will be people aware? People are not sensitized towards environmental films. I mean, it's not something that has a pull factor. So, first they have to be made aware. So do you all have a, marketing strategy as such when you make a film? Because the film festivals will have a limit to which people will come and watch. Rather than going out to the masses with these kind of films.
I'll answer a bit of one experience of ours. When we made Desi Un, it was for Center for Pastoralism. They didn't have any fund. They didn't have even reach to they know people there, but even to show what this this film kind of encapsulates the entire journey of a shepherd and and a sheep, everything. So when we created this film, we did that sort of a role for them, because we were pushing teasers, making of the film, everything was on YouTube and other places, which caught quite a bit of traction because of our social media handles and everything in the beginning. And once the film was out, and when it started going to festivals, like especially like Cannes Lions and TNAD, all the very big ones, now the film is invited by many festivals. So it's been like 4 or 5 months now the film is on the move. So at least 60 shortlists in festivals around the world it's got. So it's traveling to such places, and the discussions are going on in those areas. And within India also, there are several exhibitions that are inviting this film to be screened, with us going and talking with pastoralists and everyone. So it creates platforms like that where you can go and talk to schools and other places. Like Anand Patwardhan, when I was studying at NID, when he came and showed Ram Ke Naam, there was a rage in the campus. The entire students were like, they really wanted to do something. They were so ignited by the film and his talk afterwards that that sort of a catalytic sort of a reaction. But that can happen when a film is pushed from both ends. It's not, if you rely too much on the organization to push it, there's a limitation. But if we as filmmakers also take it up and creatively come up with strategies to take it out there, then it can really happen. So what we are doing now, like in this context, we are also, we understood the difficulties that these foundations are facing. So we are creating a foundation ourselves so to make films and work with them. So we don't become unaffordable for them as a profit-making entity, but we would really work with them and help them with strategies and design thinking and everything, so that they get visibility that they need. So there is a lot of, that's an ideal way of working on this space, I feel, because profitability would really make them feel scared, and it's a no-starter.
I also just want to add that marketings are normally, especially what you're talking about, like the teasers, this kind of mass bombardment, that's usually not done by filmmakers, it's done by distributors. Which brings us back to the conversation of a lot of our films don't get distribution, so we don't have these big distributors who will then spend crores on marketing. So it's all like, unfortunately all of it is tied in. But that said, of course, like a lot of us, especially if we have some sort of funding during making the film or we have some know-how, we do of course do our own campaigns. There's this whole kind of field emerging called impact campaigning, where we make the issue the center, so that we attract more audiences, we hold screenings, we do a lot of things around it. So everybody's trying to develop their own creative ways of getting the film to wider audiences, of course.
One last question. Thank you.
Good evening. It is really heartbreaking for a producer to see there are no audiences in film festivals. What can be done to bring audiences to film festivals? Also, can information and broadcasting ministry be brought in to help in this particular endeavor? Secondly, cannot public-private partnership be brought in and create a fund to finance the documentaries? Something on the lines of the BBC, how they do, different, they have different issues. Even environment, they are very big, you see some of the documentaries. They're all phenomenal, So can something like that be done over here also? As a CSR initiative also for corporates or someone, something like that. Thank you.
I'll just give my 2 bits. I think several of them are doing it. Like, I think Nandan Nilekani has a foundation. Several others are doing in their JSW group. They're all trying to do their best in this space. But I don't know whether there's a consolidated forum or there's a space where there's an organization where all these funds come and they kind of curate. So, these sort of, originally in India we had NFDC and all these things. They were all doing such things. There was also Children's Film Society, which is now gone. So all these entities were there in the original design of, where documentaries would keep happening. There will be some funding for such entities. But right now, I think it is, you're right. It largely depends on the private entities to, kind of come together and do something. Like a festival like Mumbai International Film Festival, which has quite a large funding from the government. But there is hardly any footfall for that. Nobody comes for the biggest screening. Great screening facilities, amazing auditoriums, projectors are all like really, but they publicize in a very different way. I think on newspaper and all nobody sees those newspaper ads.
I'll just jump in here. I'll just say that the problem perhaps with environmental films is a private entity may be the polluter. You can't have a steel company or some iron ore company, underwriting a festival, then they may. There is censorship involved with private money, which is a big problem that filmmakers, festivals, all of us face. It's silent censorship sometimes. Certain films will be dropped, they won't be programmed because the sponsors say, we don't. Suresh gave the example of Anand Patwardhan's Ram Ke Naam. It's unimaginable that a college today will show that film because they're so scared of the world that we're living in. Nobody's going to show such films. Yeah. So The other thing I will say is that where the state, the government can make the best intervention is by allowing films to be shown without a censor certificate. That is the biggest problem, right? Censorship is not just for films that are being released in cinemas. If you're organizing a festival, you have to submit, and correct me if I'm wrong, Yanaka, you have to submit a list of every single film to the INB ministry in Delhi. I may be some Kutti festival sitting in I don't know where, wherever. I have to submit, they will clear it. Whatever the theme of my festival, whatever the scale of my festival. If for some reason there is some film on it, if your government is fighting with Russia today, if there is an anti-Russian film, they'll say drop it. Palestine, whatever the issue. If there's an anti-Israel film, drop it. Because whatever, there may be other concerns. But so there is that kind of censorship. And then if I have a physical entity, like a physical structure in Bombay, there used to be Akashvani, the theatre, which was run by, some people of a certain generation will remember it. My parents have watched films there. It used to be the All India Radio at near Bombay Gymkhana. They would show all the, what we now call art films. All of them would be shown there. They would charge tickets and they would make money out of it. Unless the government allows certain cultural centers to show documentaries, independent films without censorship, at a low ticket rate, trust the filmmaker and the audience to watch these films without being treated like children, I don't think that is the best intervention they can actually make. Funding and all comes with a lot of other problems. Anyway, I don't think we have time for anything else. Anarky, maybe you want to just, since your event is the one that's imminent.
No. I mean, I think I just wanted to add, not to sound trite, but I think in the world that we live in, there's a certain virality and coolness factor attached to pretty much any festival, any film. And if it does manage to gather some of that buzz online is also one way in which that footfall can be guaranteed. And disappointingly, that often seems to be the dominant way in which things are getting popular,
Making environment great again. Yes. Thank you all. Thank you so much. And thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Avid.
Thank you so much.